10 years they lived under my roof, free, not a single mortgage payment, not even a utility bill split down the middle. Now, they're about to learn that rent was cheap compared to revenge. My name is Helen Brandt, and I'm 56 years old. For the last 30 years, I managed the cafeteria at Riverside High School. I've hauled industrial-sized bags of flour, wrestled with ancient ovens that could burn your arm off if you weren't careful, and scrubbed grease stains that would make a crime scene investigator quit. My hands are rough, my back aches on cold mornings, but I'm tougher than I look, and people forget that. People also forget that just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're stupid. I woke up that morning with the sun barely cracking through the blinds of my bedroom, the smallest room in my own house. My daughter Julia and her husband Evan had claimed the master bedroom years ago. Said they needed the space. Said I wouldn't mind. I didn't argue. Back then, I thought I was helping. I thought I was being a good mother. I swung my legs out of bed and planted my feet on the cold hardwood floor. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Julia and Evan wouldn't be up for hours. They never were. Evan didn't work, not really. He called himself an entrepreneur, but that just meant he spent his days on the couch scrolling through his phone, looking for the next get-rich-quick scheme that would inevitably fizzle out. Julia had reinvented herself as a lifestyle influencer, which was just a fancy way of saying she took pictures of her coffee and posted them online, hoping someone would care. Neither of them contributed a dime to the household. I shuffled into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Grey hair pulled back in a ponytail. Lines around my eyes that hadn't been there a decade ago. I looked tired. I was tired. But there was something else in my reflection that morning, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone and waits. I got dressed and went downstairs. The kitchen was a disaster. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. Empty takeout containers on the counter. A half-eaten pizza in a box on the table. I'd cleaned up after them yesterday morning, and here it was again. The same mess, the same disrespect. I started the coffee maker and leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the quiet street. This was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business, where gossip spread faster than wildfire, where your reputation could be destroyed over a casserole gone wrong at a potluck. I'd lived here my whole life, raised my kids here. Julia was 32 now, and my son Caleb was 29. Both of them had grown up in this house. Both of them had left for college, promising they'd make something of themselves. Julia dropped out after 2 years. Caleb finished, barely, and came back with a business degree he never used. And then they'd stayed. Julia moved back in first, right after her wedding to Evan, said it was temporary, just until they got on their feet. That was 10 years ago. Caleb followed a few years later with his wife Mira. They stayed for 3 years before finally moving out to a rental across town. But even now, Caleb acted like this house was his, like I owed him something. The coffee finished brewing and I poured myself a cup. Black, no sugar. I didn't need sweetness anymore. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, lazy footsteps. Evan appeared in the doorway, still in his pajama pants and a faded t-shirt. His hair stuck up in every direction. He scratched his stomach and yawned. "Morning," he muttered, not looking at me. "Morning," I said. He opened the fridge and stared into it like he was waiting for food to magically appear. "We got any eggs?" "No." "Bacon?" "No." He sighed, like this was somehow my fault. "Guess I'll have cereal." He grabbed the box from the cupboard, poured himself a bowl, and sat down at the table without clearing the pizza box first. Just shoved it aside. I watched him eat, shoveling spoonfuls into his mouth, milk dribbling down his chin. "You working today?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Nah, got some calls to make. Networking stuff." "Networking?" "Sure." Julia came down a few minutes later, looking better than Evan, but not by much. She was still pretty, I'd give her that. Blonde hair, big blue eyes, the kind of face that photographs well. She'd built a small following online, a few thousand people who liked her pictures of lattes and sunsets. She treated it like a full-time job, but it didn't pay the bills. "Good morning, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. She always called me Mother when she wanted something. "Morning." She poured herself coffee and added 3 sugars and a heavy pour of creamer. "Did you pick up my dry cleaning yesterday?" "No." Her smile faltered. "Why not? I asked you to." "I had things to do." "What things? You're retired." I didn't answer. I just sipped my coffee and stared at her. She huffed and pulled out her phone, scrolling through it while she drank. This was my life now. Invisible. A maid in my own home. A woman who'd worked her entire life, saved every penny, bought this house with my own money, and now I was treated like I didn't exist unless they needed something. I finished my coffee and set the mug in the sink. "I'm going out," I said. "Where?" Julia asked, not looking up from her phone. "Errands." "Can you pick up groceries? We're out of everything." Of course we were. I grabbed my purse and keys and walked out the door before she could add anything else to the list. The morning air was crisp, and I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I drove into town, past the old diner where the retirees gathered every morning to drink coffee and trade gossip, past the hardware store and the library and the park where I used to take Julia and Caleb when they were little. Everything looked the same as it always had. Nothing ever changed in this town. Except me. I pulled into the parking lot of Ferguson Real Estate and sat in my car for a moment, staring at the building. This was it. The point of no return. Once I walked through that door, there was no going back. I got out of the car and went inside. The office was small and smelled like stale air freshener. A woman sat behind the front desk, typing on a computer. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. "Good morning, can I help you?" "I'd like to sell my house," I said. Her smile widened. "Of course, let me get someone to help you with that." She picked up the phone and made a call, and a minute later, a man in his 40s came out of a back office. He had a friendly face and a firm handshake. "I'm Tom Ferguson," he said. "I understand you're looking to sell?" "That's right." "Great. Let's sit down and talk." We went into his office and he pulled out a stack of paperwork. He asked me questions about the house. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Square footage? Condition? I answered every question calmly, methodically. He nodded along, taking notes. "This should move pretty quickly," he said. "It's a seller's market right now. Good neighborhood. I think we can get you a solid offer within a week." "I don't want to wait a week," I said. He looked up, surprised. "Oh?" "I want it sold as fast as possible. I'll take the first reasonable offer." He blinked. "Are you sure? We could get you more if we wait." "I'm sure." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll make it happen." We went over the paperwork. I signed where he told me to sign. By the time I walked out of that office, the wheels were already in motion. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The house was still quiet when I got back. Evan was on the couch, watching TV. Julia was upstairs, probably taking pictures of herself in the mirror. I went into the kitchen and started cleaning. Not because I had to, not because they expected it, but because I wanted to, because it was the last time I'd ever cleaned this kitchen for them. And then Caleb showed up. He knocked once and let himself in, the way he always did, like he owned the place. He walked into the kitchen with that same entitled swagger he'd had since he was a teenager. Behind him was Mira, his wife, dressed like she was going to brunch at some fancy restaurant instead of visiting her mother-in-law in the middle of the day. "Hey, Mom," Caleb said, opening the fridge and pulling out a beer, at 2 p.m. "Caleb," I said. Mira gave me a tight smile. "Hi, Helen." She never called me Mom. Never even tried. I didn't care anymore. Caleb cracked open the beer and took a long drink. So listen, I need to talk to you about something. What? We're having a little birthday thing for me next week. Just family. Maybe 19 people or so. I raised an eyebrow. 19 people? Yeah, no big deal. I figured you could cook. You know, do your thing. My thing. Yeah, like you used to. That roast you make. And those potatoes. Everyone loves those. I stared at him. You want me to cook for 19 people? Well, yeah, it's my birthday. Mira chimed in, her voice sweet as poison. It would mean so much to him, Helen. You know how he loves your cooking. I looked at Caleb, really looked at him. My son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, the boy who'd come back here and treated me like a servant. Sure, I said, I'll cook. His face lit up. Awesome. Thanks, Mum. He drained the rest of his beer and tossed the can in the trash, missing by a mile. It clattered to the floor. He didn't pick it up, just walked out of the kitchen with Mira trailing behind him. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty beer can on the floor. And then I smiled. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. The next few days passed in a blur of fake smiles and forced politeness. Caleb had texted me a list of what he wanted for his birthday dinner. A list, like I was catering a wedding. Pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade rolls, apple pie. I replied with a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. Julia noticed I was quieter than usual. She cornered me in the hallway one afternoon, her phone in one hand, a half-empty iced coffee in the other. You okay, Mother? She asked, her voice dripping with concern that didn't reach her eyes. Fine. You seem, I don't know, off. I'm just tired. Well, don't overdo it. You're not getting any younger. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from saying something I'd regret. Not yet. Not until everything was in place. She floated back upstairs to take more pictures of herself, and I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I pulled out my phone and checked my email. Tom Ferguson had sent me an update. 3 offers already, all of them close to asking price. One was from an out-of-town investor who wanted to close within 2 weeks. I replied immediately. Accept the offer. Let's move fast. He responded within an hour. Done. I'll send over the paperwork. I sat on the edge of my bed and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was really happening. The house was sold. My house. The house I'd bought with my own money, paid off with my own sweat, and I was taking it away from them. From all of them. That night, I went to the grocery store. I walked up and down the aisles, filling my cart with the cheapest, most insulting food I could find. Instant mashed potatoes, canned green beans, frozen dinner rolls, a Sara Lee pie from the freezer section. I added a bag of store-brand chips and a jar of the blandest salsa I could find. The cashier rang me up without comment. I paid in cash and loaded everything into my car. When I got home, Julia was in the living room with Evan, both of them watching some reality show about people fighting over houses they couldn't afford. They didn't look up when I walked past with the groceries. I put everything away and went to bed early. Tomorrow was Caleb's birthday. Tomorrow, everything would change. I woke up the next morning to the sound of voices downstairs. Loud voices. I checked the clock. 8 a.m. Who the hell was here at 8 in the morning? I got dressed and went downstairs to find the kitchen full of people. Caleb was there, of course, along with Mira, but so were Julia and Evan, and Caleb's college roommate, Travis, and Mira's sister, whose name I could never remember, and a handful of other people I vaguely recognized from family gatherings over the years. They were drinking coffee and talking loudly, laughing at jokes I wasn't part of. Caleb saw me and grinned. There she is. Morning, Mum. Morning. We got here early to help set up, get everything ready. I looked around. They hadn't set up anything. They were just standing around, using my kitchen like it was a hotel lobby. Where's the food? Mira asked, looking around like she expected to see a catered buffet. I'll start cooking soon, I said. Great, we're starving. More people started arriving over the next hour. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. By noon, there were 19 people crammed into my house, all of them expecting me to feed them. I went into the kitchen and started pulling out the food I'd bought. The instant potatoes, the canned beans, the frozen rolls. I opened the packages slowly, methodically, my hand steady. Julia walked in and stopped short. What is that? Food. That's instant mashed potatoes. Yep. Mom, you said you were cooking. I am cooking. This is what I'm making. Her face turned red. Are you kidding me? Caleb asked for a real meal. This is garbage. Then maybe Caleb should have cooked it himself. She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. What is wrong with you? Nothing. I'm just done. Done with what? With this. With all of you. I turned back to the counter and opened the can of green beans, dumped them into a pot, turned on the stove. Julia stood there for another moment, then stormed out of the kitchen. I heard her talking to Caleb in the next room, her voice sharp and angry. Then Caleb's voice, louder, angrier. Then footsteps. He burst into the kitchen like a storm. What the hell, Mom? Hello, Caleb. Happy birthday. Don't happy birthday me. Julia said you're making instant potatoes. Are you serious? Very serious. I asked you to make a nice meal. I asked you weeks ago. No, you told me to make a nice meal. You didn't ask. His face turned red. What's the difference? The difference is I'm not your servant. You're my mother. Exactly, I'm your mother, not your maid, not your cook, not your free labor. He stepped closer, his jaw tight. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Yeah, you are. We're family. Family helps each other out. Funny, I don't remember you helping me out when I asked you to fix the leaking sink last month, or when I needed help moving furniture, or when I asked you to contribute to the utility bill. That's different. How? He didn't have an answer. He just stood there, fuming. I turned back to the stove. The food will be ready in 20 minutes. If you don't like it, there's a diner in town. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I finished cooking, if you could call it that. I dumped the instant potatoes into a serving bowl, heated the canned green beans, threw the frozen rolls in the oven, cut the Sara Lee pie into slices, and arranged them on a plate. When everything was ready, I carried it out to the dining room table. The room went silent when I set the food down. 19 people stared at the spread, at the instant mashed potatoes in a chipped bowl, at the canned green beans in a pot still dripping water, at the frozen rolls, slightly burnt on the edges, at the sad store-bought pie. Caleb stood up slowly. What is this? Dinner. This is not dinner. This is an insult. Then don't eat it. Mira stood up next to him. Helen, this is unacceptable. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Did I? Or did you embarrass yourselves by expecting me to cook a feast for 19 people without even asking if I wanted to? Julia chimed in from the corner. We asked you. No, Caleb told me. There's a difference. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Everyone stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd just found it. Caleb's voice dropped low, dangerous. You're going to regret this. Am I? Yeah, you are. He walked over to me, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. Starting today, Mom, you eat your own food. Stop thinking I'm going to support some old woman. The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, this man I'd raised, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, and I felt nothing but cold, hard resolve. Support me, I said quietly. Caleb, you've never supported me, not once in your entire life. His face twisted. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you paid for anything in this house? When was the last time you even thanked me? He didn't answer. I looked around the room at all of them. Julia, with her phone in her hand, probably recording this for her followers. Evan, slouched in his chair, useless as always. Mira, with her fake smile and her designer purse. All the relatives who'd shown up expecting a free meal. I want all of you out of my house, I said. Caleb laughed. A mean, bitter laugh. Your house? Mom, come on. This house is going to be mine. Excuse me? You heard me. You're not going to live forever. And when you're gone, this house goes to me and Julia. That's how it works. Is that what you think? That's what I know. I smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd felt in years. Well, Caleb, I have some news for you. What? I sold the house. The room exploded. For a moment, no one moved. They just stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Then the shouting started. Caleb was the loudest. What do you mean you sold the house? Exactly what I said. I sold it. You can't do that. I can. I did. Julia pushed through the crowd, her face pale. When? When did you sell it? Last week. It closes in 10 days. 10 days? Her voice cracked. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Julia. Where were you planning to go before you moved in here 10 years ago? Evan stood up, his face red. This is insane. You can't just kick us out. I'm not kicking you out. You're adults. You've been living here rent-free for a decade. I think you've had enough time to figure out your next move. Caleb stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. You had no right to do this without talking to us. I had every right. It's my house. Not anymore, apparently, Mira said, her voice sharp. I turned to her. You're right, not anymore. But it was never yours to begin with. Caleb's face was purple now. We'll contest this. We'll take you to court. On what grounds? On the grounds that you're clearly not in your right mind. This is elder abuse. I laughed. Actually laughed. Elder abuse? Caleb, I'm 56. I'm not elderly, and I'm perfectly sound of mind. Then why would you do this? Because I'm tired. I'm tired of being used. I'm tired of being disrespected. I'm tired of living in my own house like I'm a guest. Julia's eyes were shiny with tears now. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. I can't believe you're doing this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, Julia. I'm doing something for me, for the first time in my life. The relatives started filing out, muttering to each other. I heard whispers, shocked, selfish, cruel. I didn't care. Let them talk. When the last of them left, it was just me, Julia, Evan, Caleb, and Mira. The house felt bigger without all those people crammed into it, quieter. Caleb's voice was ice. You're going to fix this. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You're going to call the buyer and cancel the sale. I can't do that, and even if I could, I wouldn't. Then we'll make you. How? He didn't answer. He just stared at me with a look I'd never seen before. Hatred. Pure, unfiltered hatred. They left one by one. Mira first, stomping out the door without a word. Then Evan, muttering under his breath. Julia lingered for a moment, her face streaked with tears. I hope you're happy, she said. I will be. She slammed the door on her way out. Caleb was the last to leave. He stood in the doorway, his jaw tight. This isn't over. Yes, it is. No, it's not. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. He walked out and I locked the door behind him. The house was silent, empty. Mine. I sat down on the couch and closed my eyes. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from relief. I'd done it. I'd finally stood up for myself. But I knew Caleb. I knew he wouldn't let this go. He'd come back. He'd find a way to make my life hell. So I had to move faster. The next morning, I woke up early and got to work. I started packing. Not everything, just the things that mattered. Photo albums, my mother's jewelry, the quilt my grandmother made. I packed them into boxes and loaded them into my car. I called Tom Ferguson. I need to move the closing date up. How soon? As soon as possible. I'll see what I can do. He called me back an hour later. The buyer agreed. We can close in 3 days. Perfect. I spent the next 3 days in a frenzy, packing, sorting, donating. I called a junk removal service and had them haul away everything Julia and Evan had left behind. Furniture, clothes, electronics, all of it. Gone. Julia tried to come back once. She knocked on the door, calling my name. I didn't answer. She stood out there for 10 minutes before finally giving up. Caleb tried calling. I blocked his number. On the 3rd day, I met Tom at the title company. I signed the papers. The buyer signed the papers. And just like that, the house was no longer mine. I walked out of that office with a check in my hand and a weight off my shoulders. I drove to a storage unit I'd rented on the other side of town. I unloaded the boxes from my car and locked them inside. Then I drove to a motel on the edge of town and checked in. The room was small and smelled like stale cigarettes, but it was mine. No one else's. Just mine. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something. But all I felt was free. My phone buzzed. A text from Julia. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk." I deleted it. Another text. This one from Caleb. "You can't hide forever." I turned off my phone. I spent the next few days in that motel room, planning my next move. I couldn't stay there forever. I needed a place to live, but I also needed to finish what I'd started, because selling the house was just the beginning. I thought about everything they'd taken from me over the years. Not just money, not just time, but respect, dignity, my sense of self. And I decided I was going to take it all back. I started with the utilities, the electric bill, the gas bill, the water bill. All of them were still in my name. I'd been paying them for years while Julia and Evan lived rent-free. I called each company and had the services disconnected. Next, I called the internet provider, cancelled the service. Then the phone company, cancelled Julia's cell phone plan, the one I'd been paying for since she was in college. With each call, I felt lighter, freer. I knew they'd figure it out eventually, knew they'd come looking for me, but I didn't care. Let them come. I checked out of the motel and drove to a small apartment complex on the other side of town. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen. But it was clean and quiet, and no one knew I was there. I signed the lease under my maiden name, paid first and last month's rent in cash. The landlord didn't ask questions. I moved in that afternoon with the few boxes I'd saved. I set up the bedroom first, made the bed with fresh sheets, hung up my clothes, put my mother's jewelry box on the dresser. Then I sat down on the couch and allowed myself to breathe. For the first time in 10 years, I was living alone. No one asking me for anything. No one treating me like a servant, just me. It felt good, but I wasn't done. Not even close. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. Everything Julia and Evan owed me. Everything Caleb and Mira had borrowed and never returned. I wrote it all down. The unpaid utilities, thousands of dollars. The furniture they'd borrowed and never given back. The tools from my garage. The family heirlooms they'd taken without asking. I added it all up. The total made my stomach turn. They owed me over $30,000. I wasn't going to get it back. I knew that, but I could make sure they never forgot what they'd done. I opened my laptop and started searching. I found a lawyer who specialized in small claims, made an appointment for the next day. Then I went to bed, the first real sleep I'd had in weeks. The next morning, I met with the lawyer. Her name was Patricia Boone, and she was no-nonsense and sharp as a knife. I liked her immediately. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she looked up at me. You have a strong case for the unpaid utilities and the borrowed property. But it's going to be messy. Family court usually is. I don't care. They'll try to paint you as vindictive, maybe even unstable. Let them try. She smiled. All right then, let's get started. We spent the next hour going over documents, bills, bank statements, text messages. I'd kept everything, every receipt, every email, every piece of evidence that showed just how much they'd taken from me. Patricia was impressed. You're thorough. I had a lot of time to prepare. When do you want to file? Today. She raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I'm sure. We filed the paperwork that afternoon. By the time I left her office, the wheels were in motion. I knew what would happen next. They'd be served with papers. They'd freak out. They'd call me, yell at me, threaten me. But I was ready. I went home and waited. The call came 2 days later. Julia. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. What the hell is this? You're suing us? Yes. For what? For the money you owe me. We don't owe you anything. $30,000 says otherwise. That's insane. We're family. Family doesn't use each other. You're doing this to punish us, because you're bitter and petty and... I hung up. Caleb called next. He was calmer, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath his words. Mom, this is a mistake. No, it's not. You're going to lose, and you're going to look like a fool. Maybe, but at least I'll look like a fool who stood up for herself. This is going to destroy our family. Our family was already destroyed, Caleb. You just didn't notice because you were too busy taking advantage of me. That's not fair. Isn't it? He didn't answer. Goodbye, Caleb. I hung up and blocked his number too. Over the next few days, I got more calls, more texts, more voicemails, all of them angry, all of them accusing me of being selfish, cruel, ungrateful. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on the future, on building a life that was mine. I got a part-time job at a local library, shelving books and helping patrons. It didn't pay much, but I didn't need much. The money from the house sale was sitting in a savings account, untouched. I thought about what to do with it. I could invest it, I could travel, I could do anything I wanted. But first, I had to finish what I'd started. They didn't let it go. 3 days later, I got a call from Patricia. They filed a countersuit, she said. For what? Elder abuse, emotional distress. They're claiming you're mentally unstable and that you sold the house in a state of diminished capacity. I laughed, actually laughed. Diminished capacity? I'm 56. I know it's a reach, but they're desperate. What do? We fight it, and we win. Do you have the documentation I asked for? Yes. Good. Bring it to my office tomorrow. We'll go through everything. I spent that night organizing every piece of evidence I had. By the time I went to bed, I had 3 folders full of documents, bank statements, emails, and text messages. Everything I needed to prove that I was perfectly sane and that Julia and Caleb were nothing but greedy, entitled children who'd finally been cut off. Someone had slashed my tires, all 4 of them, clean cuts, deliberate. I stood in the parking lot of my apartment building, staring at my car, and felt rage bubble up inside me. They wanted to play dirty. Fine, I could play dirty too. I called the police, filed a report. They took pictures, asked questions, but I knew nothing would come of it. No witnesses, no cameras, just my word against theirs. I called Mike next. He came over with his truck and helped me get the car towed to a repair shop. While we waited, he looked at me carefully. You know who did this? He asked. I have a pretty good idea. You want me to talk to them? No, I'll handle it. You sure? I'm sure. He didn't push, just nodded and drove me home. But I wasn't going to let this go. Not anymore. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the gym, not one of those fancy places with juice bars and yoga classes. A real gym. The kind with weights and punching bags and people who actually worked hard. I signed up for a membership and spent an hour on the treadmill, then another 30 minutes lifting weights. My body ached, my muscles screamed, but I felt good. I'd spent 10 years being weak, being pushed around, being the person everyone used. Not anymore. I started going to the gym every day, started building my strength back up. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to be ready for whatever they threw at me next. And they did throw more. 2 days later, Julia showed up at the library again. This time, she wasn't alone. Evan was with her, looking uncomfortable in a button-down shirt that was too tight around his stomach. "Helen," Julia said, walking up to the desk. Her voice was loud, theatrical. She wanted everyone to hear. "We need to talk about your behavior." "Not now, Julia." "Yes, now. You've been harassing us, stalking us, making our lives miserable." I looked up from the book I was scanning. "I haven't contacted you once." "That's a lie." "No, it's not. Check your phone records. Check your email. I haven't said a word to either of you." Evan stepped forward. "You sued us." "That's not harassment. That's the legal system." Julia's voice rose higher. "You're trying to destroy us." "I'm trying to get what I'm owed." "We don't owe you anything. $30,000 says otherwise." By now, everyone in the library was watching. Patrons, staff, even the teenagers in the corner who were supposed to be studying. Julia saw them watching and leaned into it. "This woman is mentally unstable. She's been threatening us, stalking us. She sold her own house just to hurt us." "That's not true," I said calmly. "Yes, it is. Everyone knows it. You're sick. You need help." I stood up slowly, looked her in the eye. "The only thing I need is for you to leave. We're not going anywhere until you drop the lawsuit. Then you're going to be standing there a long time." Evan grabbed Julia's arm. "Come on, this isn't working." "No." She pulled away from him. "She needs to admit what she did." "I did nothing wrong." "You ruined our lives." "No, Julia, you ruined your own life. You just can't accept responsibility for it." She lunged at me. I didn't think, just reacted, stepped to the side, let her momentum carry her past me. She stumbled into the desk, knocking over a stack of books. Security showed up a minute later. 2 guys, both young, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. They escorted Julia and Evan out of the building while Julia screamed about pressing charges. My manager, a quiet woman named Sandra, came over afterward. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." "What was that about?" "Family issues." She nodded, didn't ask more questions. "Take a break if you need one." "I'm fine," I said again. But I wasn't fine. Not really. Because I knew this wasn't over. Julia and Caleb were escalating, and I needed to escalate right back. I left work early and drove to Patricia's office. Told her everything that had happened. "This is good," she said, "good. They're showing their true colors. We can use this. Security footage from the library, police reports from the tire slashing, witnesses who saw them harassing you. It all builds our case. I don't care about the case anymore. I just want them to leave me alone. They won't, not until we make them." "Then make them." She smiled. "I will." Over the next week, Patricia worked her magic. She filed restraining orders, compiled evidence, built a case so airtight that even a blind judge could see Julia and Caleb for what they were. But the restraining orders just made them angrier. Caleb started showing up at places I frequented, the grocery store, the gym, the coffee shop. He didn't approach me, just watched from a distance. Wanted me to know he was there. I ignored him, kept my head down, focused on my routine. But one night he followed me home. I noticed his car behind mine about halfway through the drive. He stayed a few car lengths back, but I knew it was him. Knew he was trying to intimidate me. I didn't go straight to my apartment. Instead, I drove to the police station and parked right in front. Caleb drove past, didn't stop. I went inside and filed another report. The officer who took my statement looked tired. "Ma'am, unless he actually does something, there's not much we can do. He's violating a restraining order." "Do you have proof he was following you?" "Just my word. That's not enough. So I'm supposed to wait until he does something, until he hurts me." The officer sighed. "I'll add it to the file. If he contacts you again, call us immediately." I walked out of the station feeling more alone than I had in weeks. But I wasn't alone. Not completely. Mike called me that night. "You okay?" "How did you know?" "Small town. Word travels." "I'm fine." "You need someone to stay with you? Just for a few nights?" I paused. The offer was tempting, but I couldn't drag Mike into this mess. "No, but thank you. If that changes, you call me." "I will." I hung up and sat on my couch, staring at the wall. I was tired, so tired, tired of fighting, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of being afraid. But I wasn't going to give up. Not now, not after coming this far. I stood up and went to my bedroom, pulled out a box from under the bed. Inside were the documents I'd been collecting, the evidence, the ammunition. I'd hoped I wouldn't need it, hoped Julia and Caleb would come to their senses. But hope was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. It was time to finish this. The town meeting was on a Thursday night. I hadn't planned on going. Town meetings were usually boring affairs, discussions about road repairs and zoning laws that no one cared about. But Ruth had mentioned it at the grocery store that morning, and something in her tone made me suspicious. "You should come tonight," she said, a little too casually. "There's going to be a discussion about community standards." "Community standards?" "Yes. You know, neighborly conduct, family values, that sort of thing." I knew exactly what that meant. Julia and Caleb had gotten to her. They were going to try to turn the town against me publicly. Fine, let them try. I showed up at the community center at 7. The room was already full. I recognized most of the faces. People I'd known for decades. People I'd served lunch to when their kids were in high school. People who'd smiled at me in church and waved at me in the grocery store. Now they were all staring. I found a seat in the back and waited. The meeting started with the usual business. Road repairs, budget discussions, a debate about whether to allow a new gas station on the edge of town. I watched the clock, waiting. Then Julia stood up. "I'd like to address the council," she said, her voice shaking with what I assumed was supposed to be emotion, but came across as rehearsed. The council president, an older man named George Hartley, nodded. "Go ahead." Julia walked to the front of the room. She was dressed carefully, nothing too fancy, nothing too casual. She wanted to look sympathetic, relatable. "My name is Julia Hughes," she began, "and I'm here to talk about elder abuse." A murmur went through the crowd. I stayed perfectly still. "My mother, Helen Brandt, has been behaving erratically for months now. She sold her home without telling us, leaving me and my husband homeless. She's filed frivolous lawsuits against family members. She's been harassing us, stalking us, making our lives a living hell." More murmurs. I could feel eyes turning toward me. "I'm worried about her mental health," Julia continued, and now her voice did crack with real emotion. "I think she needs help, professional help, and I'm asking this community to intervene before she hurts herself or someone else." She sat down. Evan reached over and squeezed her hand. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. It was a good performance. I'd give her that. George Hartley cleared his throat. "Is Helen Brandt here tonight?" I stood up. "I'm here." Every head in the room turned. Julia's face went pale. "Would you like to respond to these allegations?" George asked. I walked to the front of the room, stood where Julia had stood, looked out at all those familiar faces. "Everything my daughter just said is a lie," I began. My voice was calm, steady. "I didn't sell my home to hurt her. I sold it because it was my home, and I had every legal right to do so. I filed a lawsuit because she and my son owe me over $30,000 in unpaid utilities and borrowed items. And I haven't stalked or harassed anyone. In fact, I have restraining orders against both of my children because they've been harassing me. Julia jumped up. That's not true. Sit down, please, George said. But she's lying. Mrs. Hughes, sit down, or I'll have you removed. Julia sat, her face red. I continued. My daughter and her husband lived in my house for 10 years without paying rent. My son and his wife did the same for 3 years. They used my utilities, ate my food, treated my home like a hotel. And when I finally asked them to contribute, they refused. When I asked them to leave, they threatened me. When I sold the house, they forged my signature on legal documents and tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. I pulled out a folder from my bag. I have documentation for everything I've just said. Bank statements showing the unpaid bills, text messages showing the threats, a forensic handwriting analysis showing the forgery. I'm happy to provide copies to anyone who wants them. I'm not mentally ill, I said. I'm not erratic. I'm not abusive. I'm a woman who spent 30 years working hard, raising her children, and trying to help them build their lives. And when they took advantage of that help, when they turned it into entitlement, I did what any rational person would do. I protected myself. I looked directly at Julia. My daughter is not a victim. She's a grown woman who made bad choices and is now facing the consequences, and I refuse to apologize for that. I sat down. The room erupted, people talking over each other. Some were nodding in agreement. Others were shaking their heads. Julia was crying. Evan was trying to calm her down. Caleb stood up from where he'd been sitting near the front. You're a liar. Sit down, Mr. Brandt, George said. No, she's lying about all of it. Then prove it, I said. He froze. What? Prove it. Show them the rent receipts. Show them the utility bills you paid. Show them any evidence that you contributed anything to that house in the 10 years you lived there. He couldn't, and everyone in that room knew it. George banged his gavel. This meeting is about town business, not family disputes. If you have a legal matter to settle, take it to court. We already are, I said. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that, people arguing, taking sides. Ruth was in the corner, practically vibrating with excitement at having front row seats to the drama of the decade. I left before it could get worse, walked out into the cool night air and took a deep breath. I'd done it. I'd stood up in front of the entire town and defended myself, and I'd won. But as I walked to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast footsteps. I turned just in time to see Caleb running toward me. He swung at me. I ducked. His fist hit air. I didn't think, just reacted. All those weeks at the gym paid off. I grabbed his arm, twisted, used his momentum to throw him off balance. He stumbled and fell to the pavement. You're insane, he screamed. No, I said, standing over him. I'm done. People were coming out of the community center now, watching, recording on their phones. I didn't care. I looked down at Caleb, this man I'd raised, this man who'd just tried to hit me, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Come near me again, I said quietly, and I'll press charges, assault, attempted battery, violation of a restraining order, whatever sticks. I walked away, left him there on the ground, got in my car and drove home. My hands were shaking by the time I pulled into the parking lot. Not from fear, from adrenaline. From the sheer rush of finally, standing up for myself in a way that couldn't be ignored. I went inside and poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch and waited for my phone to ring. It did. Patricia. I've been getting calls, she said. What happened? I told her everything. He tried to hit you. He tried. He failed. And there were witnesses. Dozens, plus video. She was quiet for a moment. This is good for our case. I know. But Helen, you need to be careful. They're desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. I can handle them. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, This is escalating fast. Good. Let it escalate. Let them show the world exactly who they are. I'm done hiding. All right, but please be careful. And if anything else happens, call me immediately. I will. I hung up and finished my wine. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I woke to find my apartment building surrounded by reporters. Small-town reporters, but reporters nonetheless. The local news had picked up the story. Family feud erupts at town meeting. I didn't talk to them, just went to work and ignored the cameras. But the story spread. Within days, it was all over social media. Julia's influencer followers had picked it up. Some supported her, others called her out. The comment section was a war zone. I didn't engage, didn't comment, didn't defend myself online. I'd said everything I needed to say. Now, I just had to wait for the court date and plan my final move. The court date was set for 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to gather every last piece of evidence. 3 weeks to make sure that when I walked into that courtroom, I had everything I needed to destroy them. But I wasn't going to wait 3 weeks to make my next move. I drove out to the old house one afternoon. The new owners hadn't moved in yet. The place sat empty, waiting. I parked across the street and stared at it. 30 years of my life in that house. 30 years of memories. Some good, most recent ones bad. I didn't feel sad looking at it. I felt free. I drove away and headed across town to Caleb and Mira's rental. I knew their schedule. Knew Caleb worked occasional odd jobs in the afternoons. Knew Mira liked to go to the gym around 2. The house was empty. I didn't break in. Didn't need to. But I did walk around the property, took pictures, noted the storage shed in the backyard that was full of my things. Things they'd taken from the house before I sold it. Furniture, tools, family heirlooms, stolen property. I called Patricia. I found my stuff. Where? At Caleb's place, in his storage shed. How do you know it's yours? I can see it through the window. My grandmother's rocking chair, my father's toolbox, things with my name on them. Don't do anything. I'll file a motion to have them returned. How long will that take? A few weeks, maybe longer. I don't have a few weeks. Helen, I'm getting my things back, today. That's a bad idea. Maybe, but I'm doing it anyway. I hung up and called Mike. I need your help, I said. What kind of help? The kind where you don't ask questions. There was a pause. Where are you? I gave him the address. He showed up 20 minutes later in his truck. What are we doing? He asked. Getting my property back. I showed him the storage shed. He looked at it, then at me. This legal? It's my property. They stole it. So yes, it's legal. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. All right, let's make it quick. The shed wasn't locked. We opened it and started loading everything into his truck. The rocking chair, the toolbox, boxes of Christmas decorations, photo albums, everything they'd taken. We were almost done when Mira's car pulled into the driveway. She got out and froze when she saw us. What are you doing? She screamed. Taking back what's mine, I said. You can't do that, that's theft. No, it's recovery. You stole these things from my house, I'm taking them back. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. She pulled out her phone. I kept loading boxes. Mike worked faster now, his jaw set. We finished and climbed into the truck, just as Mira started yelling into her phone. We drove away before the police could arrive. That was stupid, Mike said. Probably. You're going to get arrested. Maybe, but I got my things back. He shook his head but didn't say anything else. We unloaded everything at my apartment. By the time we finished, it was getting dark. Mike refused payment. Just be careful, he said. These people are dangerous. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're poking a bear. Good. Let the bear come out. Let everyone see it for what it is. He drove away and I went inside. My apartment was cluttered now with all the recovered items, but I didn't care. They were mine, and I had them back. The police showed up an hour later, 2 officers. Both looked tired. "Mrs. Brandt?" one of them said. "Yes." "We got a call about a theft. I recovered stolen property, not the same thing. The caller says you broke into her property. The shed wasn't locked, and everything I took belonged to me. I have receipts, documentation, everything." The officers exchanged glances. "Do you have that documentation?" "I do." I showed them everything, photos of the items in my house before I sold it, receipts for the things I'd purchased, heirlooms with my parents' names engraved on them. The officers looked it over. "This seems legitimate." "It is. But you should have gone through legal channels." "I tried. It was taking too long." One of the officers sighed. "We'll file a report, but if they want to pursue this, they can take it to civil court." "Fine." They left. I locked the door behind them and sat down on the couch, surrounded by my recovered possessions. I'd crossed a line today. I knew that, but I didn't care. They'd been crossing lines for years. Now it was my turn. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I knew Julia and Caleb were planning something. I could feel it. I went to the gym, went to work, lived my life. But I was always watching, always waiting. And then, a week before the court date, I got a call from Patricia. "They've dropped the countersuit," she said. "What?" "They dropped it, completely, no explanation." "Why would they do that?" "I don't know, but it's good news for us. Means we can focus entirely on your suit against them." I should have been relieved, should have felt like I was winning, but instead, I felt uneasy. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "Maybe they realized they didn't have a case. Or maybe they're planning something else." "Like what?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." I hung up and sat there, thinking. Julia and Caleb weren't the type to give up, not without a fight. So what were they planning? I found out 2 days later. I came home from work to find my apartment door open. Not broken, just open. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding. Someone had been inside. I called 911, then waited in the hallway until the police arrived. They searched the apartment. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But everything had been moved, slightly. Just enough to let me know someone had been there. It was a message. "We can get to you any time we want." The police filed a report but couldn't do much. No forced entry, no witnesses, no evidence. I called Mike. "I need to stay somewhere else for a few days." "You can stay here," he said without hesitation. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Pack a bag. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. I packed quickly, threw everything into a duffel bag, and waited outside. Mike pulled up and I climbed into his truck. "Thank you," I said. "Don't mention it." I stayed at Mike's place for 3 days. He had a small house on the edge of town, quiet and isolated. I slept on his couch and tried not to think about what Julia and Caleb might do next. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop planning, because I knew what I had to do. I had to end this, not with lawyers, not with court dates, with one final devastating move that would destroy them completely. And I knew exactly how to do it. The fairground had been abandoned for 5 years. It used to be the highlight of summer in this town. Cheap rides, overpriced food, and a carousel that played the same warped music over and over. But the owner died. His kids didn't want it, and the whole place just rotted away behind a chain-link fence. I'd driven past it 100 times, never thought much about it, until now. I stood at the fence line, looking in at the rusted rides and crumbling ticket booths. The Ferris wheel sat frozen in place, some of its cars hanging at odd angles. The carousel was covered in graffiti. The whole place smelled like decay and standing water. It was perfect. Mike had been letting me stay at his place for almost a week now. I'd gone back to my apartment once to grab more clothes and found another message. This time, they'd left a note on my kitchen table. We're not done with you. No signature. Didn't need one. I'd taken a photo of the note and sent it to Patricia. She said we could use it in court, but I wasn't interested in court anymore. I was interested in ending this my way. I'd been thinking about it for days, planning it, every detail. I couldn't just keep running, couldn't keep waiting for them to make the next move. I needed to draw them out, make them come to me, on my terms, my ground, and I needed them to show everyone exactly who they really were. I called Caleb from a burner phone I'd bought at a gas station. He answered on the second ring. "Who is this?" "It's me." Silence. Then, "Mom, I want to settle this." "Settle what?" "Everything. The lawsuit, the property, all of it." "Why would I believe you?" "Because I'm tired, Caleb. I'm tired of fighting. I just want this over." Another pause. I could hear him breathing, thinking. "What do you want?" "Meet me, tonight. We'll talk, figure this out like adults." "Where?" "The old fairground, off Route 12. "Why there?" "Because it's neutral ground. No one will bother us. We can talk privately." "This is a trap." "It's not. I just want to talk. Bring Julia if you don't trust me. Bring Evan. I don't care. Just come." He was quiet for a long moment. "What time?" 8 o'clock. There's a hole in the fence on the east side, near the old ticket booth. "If this is some kind of—" "It's not. I promise. I just want this over." I hung up before he could change his mind. Then I called Patricia, told her everything. "Helen, this is insane," she said. "I know. They could hurt you. They could do anything. They could, but they won't. Not if we do this right." "What do you mean, we?" "I need you to be there. Hidden. Recording everything. If this goes the way I think it will, they're going to confess to everything, and I want it on tape. I don't know if I can do this. Please, I need you." She sighed. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, I'm calling the police immediately." "Fair enough." I also called Mike, told him the plan. "You're out of your mind," he said. "Probably. And you want me there too?" "Just in case. Stay back, stay hidden. But if things go sideways, I need someone I can trust." "This is a bad idea." "I know, but it's the only idea I have left." He showed up at 7:30 with a flashlight and a baseball bat. We drove to the fairground together, parked a quarter-mile away, and walked in through the hole in the fence. The place looked even creepier at dusk. Shadows stretched long across the cracked pavement. The wind made the Ferris wheel creak. Somewhere, a piece of metal clanged rhythmically against something hollow. Patricia was already there, crouched behind the old ticket booth with a video camera. "I got here early, set up the shot." "Good. Helen, if this goes bad—" "It won't." I walked to the center of the fairground and waited. Mike disappeared into the shadows near the carousel. Patricia stayed behind the booth. At 8:05, I heard voices. They came through the fence together. All 4 of them: Caleb, Mira, Julia, and Evan. They moved as a pack, looking around nervously. I stepped forward. "I'm here." They stopped. Caleb stepped forward first. "You wanted to talk," he said. "So talk." "I want to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "I drop the lawsuit. You leave me alone. We go our separate ways and never speak again." Julia laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "That's it? That's your big offer?" "That's it." "What about the house?" Evan asked. "What about it?" "We want compensation. You sold it out from under us." "It was my house." "You owed us," Caleb shouted, "after everything we did for you." "Everything you did for me?" I took a step forward. "Name one thing. One single thing you ever did for me." He faltered. We lived with you. Kept you company." "You used me." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You lived in my house for free, used my utilities, ate my food, and when I asked you to contribute, you told me I should be grateful to have you there. You said I was a burden, that you were doing me a favor." We were. No, you weren't. You were leeching off me, and when I finally cut you off, you tried to destroy me. Julia stepped forward now, her face twisted with rage. You destroyed us. We have nothing because of you. You have nothing because of yourselves. You made bad choices. You lived beyond your means. You treated people like resources to be exploited. And now you're facing the consequences. We're your children, Julia screamed. I know, and I loved you. I gave you everything I had. But it was never enough, was it? You always wanted more. And when I didn't have anything left to give, you turned on me. Caleb stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You're going to pay for what you did. Am I? How? We'll ruin you. We'll tell everyone what a terrible mother you were, how you abandoned us, how you're crazy and vindictive and... Go ahead, tell them, see if anyone believes you. They will they? Because from where I'm standing, I have 30 years of being a good mother on my side. I have bank records showing how much I spent on you. I have witnesses who saw how you treated me. I have evidence of your lies, your manipulation, your theft. We didn't steal anything. You stole my grandmother's rocking chair, my father's tools, family heirlooms. You forged my signature on legal documents. You broke into my apartment. You slashed my tires. You threatened me. You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could take control of my assets. The fairground went silent except for the wind and that distant clanging metal. You can't prove any of that, Caleb said quietly. I smiled. Actually, I can. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I've been recording this entire conversation. Their faces went white. And I'm not the only one, I continued. There are cameras here, witnesses. Everything you just said is documented. Caleb lunged at me. I was ready. I dodged to the side. He stumbled past me, off balance. I stuck my foot out. He tripped and fell hard onto the cracked pavement. Get her, Mira screamed. Julia came at me next. I grabbed her wrist and twisted. She yelped and pulled back. Evan stood frozen, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Caleb got to his feet, his face bleeding from where he'd hit the ground. There it is, I said. The real you, the one you've been hiding behind fake smiles and fake concern. We're going to destroy you. No, you're not, because I already destroyed you. What are you talking about? I smiled. The house sale. You thought I kept the money, didn't you? Thought I was sitting on a pile of cash that should have been yours. It should have been. Too bad. I donated it. That stopped them cold. What? Julia whispered. I donated every penny to a trust. In my name. A trust that will support me for the rest of my life. A trust that none of you can touch. Ever. You can't do that. I already did. And I did something else too. I filed legal trespass notices against all of you. You're not allowed within 500 feet of my apartment, my workplace, or anywhere else I frequent. If you violate it, you'll be arrested. Caleb's face was purple with rage. We'll fight this. Go ahead, but you'll lose, because I have everything documented. Every lie, every threat, every piece of evidence that shows exactly who you are and what you've done. Why are you doing this? Julia sobbed. Because I'm done being your victim. Done being the woman you use and discard. Done being invisible in my own life. I looked at each of them in turn. Starting today, kids, you eat your own food. Caleb screamed and charged at me one more time, but Mike stepped out of the shadows and caught him, held him back. I think you should leave now, Mike said quietly. Security lights flared on suddenly. Patricia stepped out from behind the ticket booth, camera still rolling, and from the entrance, I saw police cars pulling up. Red and blue lights painting the rusted rides. I'd called them before I came. Told them there might be trouble. That I was worried my family was going to hurt me. They'd agreed to keep an eye on things. The officers approached. Caleb was still struggling against Mike's grip. Everything all right here? One of them asked. These people have restraining orders against them, I said calmly. They violated them by coming here tonight, and they just threatened me. It's all on video. The officers looked at Caleb, at Julia, at Mira and Evan. "Is this true?" they asked. "She's lying," Caleb shouted. "We have it on tape," Patricia said, holding up the camera. The officers nodded. "All right, you four need to come with us." "This is insane," Julia screamed. "She's the one who—" "Ma'am, you need to calm down." They tried to resist, tried to argue, but there were 4 officers, and only 4 of them. They were loaded into police cars one by one. Caleb never stopped shouting. Julia never stopped crying. Mira looked like she was in shock. Evan just looked defeated. I watched them drive away, red and blue lights fading into the darkness. Patricia came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it." "Yeah. How do you feel?" I thought about it. Thought about 30 years of sacrifice. 10 years of being used, months of fighting back. "Free," I said. Mike walked over. "You all right?" "I am." "You're tougher than you look." "I know." The 3 of us stood there for a moment, surrounded by the ruins of the old fairground. The wind picked up, making the Ferris wheel creak again. "What now?" Patricia asked. "Now?" I looked at her. "Now I go home."